Welcome to the final episode of this year's Shocktober, where we celebrate the spookiest month of the year by spooking it up on the channel. Today, assuming you're watching this on the day that it comes out, is Halloween, which is for many the culmination of the spooky month of October. Many people are out trick-or-treating, perhaps watching horror movies, making jack-o'-lanterns and eating candy. For some people, today is Samhain, which is the ancient pagan festival upon which at least partly Halloween is based. And to some, it is just Sunday. But in any case, I hope you're all enjoying yourselves. And today we're going to do a bit of a special episode because of the fact that it is Halloween. Not only will this be a spooky episode, just like most episodes that we do in the month of October, it will also be somewhat of a different format than what I usually do here. In fact, what I've chosen to do for Halloween this year is that I have stolen an idea from my friend Justin on the channel Esoterica. What he did last year on Halloween was that he actually read a ghost story. And that is exactly what we're going to do today, although not necessarily a ghost story, but I'm going to read you a spooky story today. And the story that I have chosen to tell you is one of the wonderful tales from the 1001 Nights, also known more commonly perhaps as the Arabian Nights. As you hopefully know by now, the Arabian Nights is of course a less than desirable name because a lot of the stories from this vast collection of tales in fact originates in Persia, in North Africa, in India, aside from Arabic tales as well. So it is tales from a wide range of cultures, and so to simply call it the Arabian Nights is kind of not the greatest thing. Therefore, the 1001 Nights is a much better title, and also actually corresponds to the original Arabic title much more, which is Alf Layla wa Layla, meaning literally 1001 nights. There's of course a lot of stories from this collection. There's the famous ones like Aladdin and his wonderful lamp. There is the story of Sinbad the sailor, Ali Baba and the 40 thieves, the fisherman and the Jinn. A lot of really great and magical stories. And some of them are actually quite spooky. There's one story about a haunted house, which ends up not being very spooky at all in the end. But there's also another story, which is the one I have chosen to read today. And that story goes under the name The City of Brass. Not one of the most famous stories from the 1001 Nights, of course, but it is quite a spooky one that features, well, a city of brass, a ghost town of sorts, as well as caliphs, and of course, as all of these stories do, it contains Jinn. So sit back in your chair or sofa, enjoy yourself, make yourself comfortable, and let's celebrate this spooky season by reading a spooky tale from the 1001 Nights entitled The City of Brass. I will be reading a translation by Edward William Lane from the early 20th century. It's quite an old translation which features kind of old-timey English. I will be adjusting the translation a bit when I find it necessary to make it a bit more understandable to a modern audience, but largely I will be following this translation by Lane when I read this story. So here is The City of Brass from the 1001 Nights. There was, in olden time, and in an ancient age and period, in Damascus of Syria, a king, one of the Khalifas, named Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. And he was sitting one day, having with him the great men of his empire, consisting of kings and sultans, when a discussion took place among them about the traditions of former nations. They called to mind the stories of our Lord Solomon, the son of David, on whom both be peace, and the dominion and authority which God, whose name be exalted, had bestowed upon him over mankind and the jinn and the birds and the wild beasts and other things. And they said, We have heard from those who were before us that God, whose perfection be exalted and whose name be exalted, bestowed not upon anyone like that of which he bestowed upon our Lord Solomon. and that he attained to that which none other attained, so that he used to imprison the Jinn and the Marids and the devils in bottles of brass, and pour molten lead over them, and seal this cover over them with a signet. Then Talib, the son of Sahel, related that a man embarked in a ship with a company of others, and they voyaged to the island of Sicily, and ceased not in their course until there arose against them a wind which bore them away to one of the lands of God, whose name be exalted. This happened during the black darkness of night, and when the day shone forth, there came out to them from the caves in that land people of black complexion with naked bodies. They had a king of their own race, and none of them knew Arabic save the king. So when they saw the ship and those who were in her, he came forth to them, attended by a party of his companions, and saluted them and welcomed them, and inquired of them respecting their religion. They therefore acquainted him with their state, and he said to them, "No harm shall befall you." And when he asked them respecting their religion, each of them was of one of the religions prevailing before the manifestation of Islam, and before the mission of Muhammad, may God bless and save him. Wherefore the people of the ship said, "We know not what thou sayest." Then the king said to them, "There hath not come to us any one of the sons of Adam before you." And he entertained them with a banquet of the flesh of birds and wild beasts and of fish, beside which they had no food. And after this, the people of the ship went down to divert themselves in the city. And they found one of the fishermen who had cast his net in the sea to catch fish, and he drew it up, and lo, it was a bottle of brass, which was sealed with the signet of Solomon the son of David, on both of whom be peace. And the fishermen came forth and broke it, whereupon there proceeded from it a blue smoke, which united with the clouds of heaven, and they heard a horrible voice, saying, "Repentance, repentance, O prophet of God." Then of that smoke there was framed a person of terrible aspect, a terrific make, whose head would reach as high as a mountain, and he disappeared from before their eyes. As to the people of the ship, their hearts were almost eradicated, but the blacks thought nothing of the event. And a man returned to the king and asked him respecting this, and the king answered him, "Know that this is one of the Jinn, whom Solomon the son of David, when he had incensed against them, imprisoned in these bottles, and he poured lead over them and threw them into the sea. When the fisherman casts his net, it generally brings these bottles, and when they are broken, there comes forth from them a Jinn, who thinks that Solomon is still living, wherefore he repents and says, 'Repentance, O prophet of God.'" And the prince of the faithful, Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, who is of course one of the most famous caliphs in history, one of the earliest caliphs of the Umayyad dynasty, the caliph who had the Dome of the Rock built in Jerusalem, for example. This is Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, who is an important person in this story. The prince of the faithful, Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, wondered at these words and said, "Extolled be the perfection of God. Solomon was endowed with a mighty dominion." And among those who were present at the assembly was An-Nabigha al-Dhubyani. And he said, Talib had spoken truth in that which he had related, and the proof of his veracity is the saying of the wise, the first, thus versified. And consider Solomon when the deity said to him, "Perform the office of Khalifa and govern with diligence. And whoso obeyeth thee, honor him for doing so, and whoso disobeyeth thee, imprison him forever." He used to put them into bottles of brass and to cast them into the sea. And the prince of the faithful approved of these words and said, "By Allah, I desire to see some of these bottles." So Talib, the son of Sahel, said, "O prince of the faithful, you are able to do so and yet remain in thy country. Send to thy brother Abdulaziz, the son of Marwan, desiring him to bring them to thee from the western country, that he may write down orders to Musa to journey from the western country to this mountain which we have mentioned, and to bring you what thou desirest of these bottles, for the furthest part of this province is adjacent to this mountain." And the prince of the faithful approved of this advice and said, "O Talib, you have spoken truth in that which you have said, and I desire that you be my messenger to Musa the son of Nusayr for this purpose. And you shall have a white ensign together with what you shall desire of wealth and dignity or other things, and I will be your substitute to take care of your family." To this Talib replied, "Most willingly, O prince of the faithful." And the Khalifa said to him, "Go in dependence on the blessing of God and his aid." Then he gave orders that they should write for him a letter to his brother Abdul Aziz, his viceroy in Egypt, and another letter to Musa, his viceroy in the western country, commanding him to journey himself in search of the bottles of Solomon, to leave his son to govern the country in his stead, and to take with him guides to expand wealth and to collect a large number of men, and not to be remiss in accomplishing that objective, nor to use any pretext to excuse himself. He sealed the two letters and delivered them to Talib, the son of Sahel, commanding him to hasten and to elevate the ensigns over his head, and he gave him riches and riches of footmen to aid him in his way. He gave orders also to supply his house with everything required. So Talib went forth on his way to Egypt. He processed with his companions, traversing the districts from Syria until they entered Misr, in other words, Egypt, when the governor of Egypt met him and lodged him with him, and he treated him with the utmost honor during the period of his stay with him. Then he sent with him a guide who accompanied him to Upper Egypt until they came to the Emir Musa, the son of Nusayr. And when he knew of his approach, he went forth to him and met him, and rejoiced at his arrival, and Talib handed to him the letter. So he took it and read it and understood its meaning, and he put it upon his head, saying, "I hear and obey the command of the Prince of the Faithful." He determined to summon the great men, and they presented themselves, and he inquired of them respecting that which had been made known to him by the letter, whereupon they said, "O Emir, if you desire him who will guide you to that place, have recourse to the Sheikh Abdul Samad, the son of Abdul Khudus al-Masmudi, for he is a knowing man, and have traveled much, and he is acquainted with these deserts and wastes and the seas, and their inhabitants and their wonders, and the countries and their districts. Have recourse therefore to him, and he will direct you to the objects of your desire." Accordingly, he gave orders to bring him, and he came before him, and lo, he was a very old man, whom the vicissitudes of years and times had rendered decrepit. The Emir Musa saluted him and said to him, "O Sheikh Abdul Samad, our Lord, the Prince of the Faithful Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, has commanded us thus and thus, and I possess little knowledge of that land, and it has been told to me that you are acquainted with that country and the routes. Have you then a wish to accomplish the affair of the Prince of the Faithful?" The Sheikh replied, "Know, Emir, that this route is difficult, far extending with few tracks." The Emir said to him, "How long a period does it require?" He answered, "It is a journey of 2 years, and some months going, and the same for the return trip. And on the way are difficulties and horrors and extraordinary and wonderful things. Moreover, you are a warrior for the defense of the faith, and our country is near unto the enemy, so perhaps the Christians may come forth during our absence. It is expedient, therefore, that you leave in your province one to govern it." He replied that he would, and left his son Harun as his substitute in this province, exacted an oath of fidelity to him, and commanded the troops that they should not oppose him, but obey him in all that he should order them to do. And they heard his words and obeyed him. Then the Emir Musa said, "Do you know if any of the kings have gone to this land before us?" He answered him, "Yes, O Emir, this land belonged to the king of Alexandria, Darius the Greek." After this they departed, and they continued their journey until they arrived at a palace, whereupon the Sheikh said, "Advance with us to this place, which presents a lesson to him who will be admonished." So the Emir Musa advanced there, together with the Sheikh Abdul Samad and his chief companions, till they came to its entrance, and they found it open, and having lofty angles and steps, among which were 2 wide steps of colored marbles, the like of which had not been seen before. The ceilings and walls were decorated with gold and silver and minerals, and over the entrance was a slab. Thereon was the inscription in ancient Greek, and the Sheikh Abdul Samad said, "Shall I read it, O Emir?" The Emir answered, "Advance and read." "May God bless thee, for nothing had happened to us during this journey, but what had been the result of the blessing attendant upon thee." So he read it, and lo, it was poetry, and it was this, quote, "Here was a people whom, after their works, thou shalt see wept over for their lost dominion. And in this palace is the last information respecting lords collected in the dust. Death has destroyed them and disunited them, and in the dust they have lost what they amassed. As though they had only put down their loads to rest a while, quickly they have departed." And the Emir Musa wept until he became insensible, and he said, There is no deity but God, the living, the enduring, without failure. He then entered the palace and was confounded by its beauty and its construction, and he looked at the figures and images that it contained. Then they attentively viewed the palace, and lo, it was devoid of inhabitants, destitute of household and occupants. Its courts were desolate, and its apartments were deserted, and in the midst of it was a chamber covered with a lofty dome, rising high into the air, around which were 400 tombs. To these tombs Emir Musa drew near, and behold, among them was a tomb constructed of marble. Then he drew near to the dome-crowned chamber, and lo, it had 8 doors of sandalwood, with nails of gold, ornamented with stars of silver set with various jewels. And after he had recovered, he entered the chamber covered with a dome, and beheld in it a long tomb, of terrible appearance, whereupon was a tablet of iron of China. And the Sheikh, Abdul Samad, drew near to it, and read its inscription. And lo, on it was written, quote, "In the name of God, the eternal, the everlasting, throughout all ages, in the name of God, who begetteth not, and who is not begotten, and unto whom there is none like, in the name of God, the mighty and powerful, in the name of the living who dieth not, to proceed. O you who arrivest at this place, be admonished by the misfortunes and calamities that you behold, and be not deceived by the world and its beauty, by its falsity and calumny, and its fallacy and finery, for it is a flatterer, a cheat, a traitor. Its things are borrowed, and it will take the loan from the borrower, and it is like the confused visions of the sleeper and the dream of the dreamer, as though it were a sarab on the plain, which the thirsty imagines to be water. The devil adorns it for man until death. These are the characteristics of the world. Confide not therefore in it, nor incline to it, for it will betray him who depends on it, and who in his affairs relies upon it. Fall not in its snares, nor cling to its skirts, for I possessed 4,000 bay horses in a stable, and I married 1,000 damsels of the daughters of kings, high-bosomed virgins like moons, and I was blessed with 1,000 children like stern lions, and I lived 1,000 years happy in my mind and heart, and I amassed riches such as the kings of the regions of the world were unable to procure, and I imagined that my enjoyments would continue without failure. But I was not aware when the alighted among us in the terminator of delights, and the separator of companions, the desolator of abodes, and the ravager of inhabited mansions, the destroyer of the great and the small, and the infants and the children and the mothers. We had resided in this palace in security until the event decreed by the Lord of all creatures, the Lord of the heavens and the Lord of the earths, befell us, and the thunder of the manifest truth assailed us. And there died us every day too, till a great company of us had perished. So when I saw that destruction had entered our dwellings, and had alighted among us, and drowned us in the sea of deaths, I summoned a writer, and ordered him to write these verses and admonitions and lessons, and caused them to be engraved upon these doors and tablets and tombs. I had an army comprising 1,000 bridles, composed of hardy men with spears and coats of mail and sharp swords and strong arms, and I ordered them to clothe themselves with the long coats of mail, and to hang on the keen swords, and to place in rest the terrible lances, and mount the high blonded horses. Then, when the event appointed by the Lord of all creatures, the Lord of the earth and the heavens, befell us, I said, O companies of troops and soldiers, can you prevent what has befallen me from the mighty king? But the soldiers and troops were unable to do so, and they said, How should we contend against him from whom none has secluded, the Lord of the door that has no doorkeeper? So I said, Bring to me the wealth. And they did so, and when they had brought the wealth before me, I said to them, Can you deliver me by means of all these riches, and purchase for me therewith 1 day during which I may remain alive? But they could not do so. They resigned themselves to fate and destiny, and I submitted to God with patient endurance of fate and affliction until he took my soul and made me dwell in my grave. And if you ask concerning my name, I am Cush, the son of Shaddad, the son of Ad, the greater. And again the Emir Musa wept until he became insensible, in considering the fates of the people, after which, as they were going about through the different apartments of the palace, and viewing attentively its chambers and its places of diversion, they came to a table upon 4 legs of alabaster, and the Emir Musa wrote all this. Then he went forth and took not with him from the palace aught save the table. The soldiers proceeded, with the Sheikh Abdul Samad before them, showing them the way, until all the first day had passed, and the second and the third. They then came to a hill, at which they looked, and lo, upon it was a horseman of brass, on the top of whose spear was a wide and glistening head that almost deprived the beholder of sight, and on it was inscribed, O thou who comest to me, if thou know not the way that leadeth to the city of brass, rub the hand of the horseman, and he will turn, and then will stop, and in whatsoever direction he stops, there proceed, without fear and without difficulty, for it will lead you to the city of brass. And when the Emir Musa had rubbed the hand of the horseman, it turned like a blinding lightning, and faced a different direction from that in which they were traveling. The party therefore turned there and journeyed on, and it was the right way. They took that route and continued their course the same day and the next day, until they had traversed a wide tract of country. As they were proceeding, one day they came to a pillar of black stone, wherein was a person sunk to his armpits, and he had 2 huge wings and 4 arms, 2 of them like those of the sons of Adam, and 2 like the 4 legs of lions, and with claws. He had hair upon his head like the tails of horses, and 2 eyes like 2 burning coals, and he had a 3rd eye in his forehead, like the eye of the lynx, from which there appeared sparks of fire. He was black and tall, and he was crying out, Extolled be the perfection of my Lord, who has appointed me this severe affliction and painful torture until the day of resurrection. When the party beheld him, their reason fled from them, and they were stupefied at the sight of his form, and retreated in flight. And the Emir Musa said to the Sheikh Abdul Samad, What is this? He answered, I know not what he is. And the Emir said, Draw near to him and investigate his case. Perhaps he will discover it, and perhaps you will learn his history. The Sheikh Abdul Samad replied, May God amend the state of the Emir. Verily we fear him. Fear ye not, rejoined the Emir, for he is withheld from injuring you and others by the state in which he is. So the Sheikh Abdul Samad drew near to him and said to him, O thou person, what is thy name, and what is thy nature, and what has placed you here in this manner? And he answered him, As to me, I am an ifrit of the Jinn, and my name is Dashish, the son of Al-Amash, and I am restrained here by the majesty, confined by the power of God, tormented as long as God, to whom be ascribed might and glory, wills. The party therefore wondered at him, and the horrible nature of his form, and the Emir Musa said, There is no deity but God. Solomon was endowed with a mighty dominion. And the Sheikh Abdul Samad said to the ifrit, O you, I ask thee concerning a thing of which you do inform us. The ifrit replied, Ask concerning that which you will. And the Sheikh said, Are there in this place any of the ifrits confined in bottles of brass from the time of Solomon, on whom be peace? The ifrit answered, Yes, in the sea of Al-Karkar, where are a people of the descendants of Noah, on whom be peace, whose country and deluge reached not, and they are separated there from the rest of the sons of Adam. And where, said the Sheikh, is the way to the city of brass, and the place wherein are the bottles? What distance is there between us and it? The ifrit answered, It is near. So the party left him and proceeded, and there appeared to them a great black object, with 2 seeming fires corresponding with each other in position in the distance in the black object. Whereupon the Emir Musa said to the Sheikh, What is this great black object, and what are these 2 corresponding fires? The guide answered him, Be rejoiced, O Emir, for this is the city of brass, and this is the appearance of it that I find described in the book of hidden treasures, that its wall is of black stones, and it has 2 towers of brass of Al-Andalus, which the beholder sees resembling 2 corresponding fires, and thence it is named the city of brass. They ceased not to proceed until they arrived at it, and lo, it was lofty, strongly fortified, rising high into the air, impenetrable. The height of its wall was 80 cubits, and it had 25 gates, none of which would open but by means of some artifice, and there was not one gate to it, and had not within the city one like it. Such was the beauty of the construction architecture of the city. They stopped before it and endeavored to discover one of its gates, but they could not. And the Emir Musa said to the Sheikh Abdul Samad, "O Sheikh, I see not to this city any gate." The Sheikh replied, "O Emir, thus do I find it described in the Book of Hidden Treasures, that it has 25 gates, and that none of its gates may be opened but from within the city." "And how," said the Emir, "can we contrive to enter it and divert ourselves with a view of its wonders?" Then the Emir Musa ordered one of his young men to mount a camel and ride round the city in the hopes that he might discover a trace of a gate or a place lower than that to which they were opposite. So one of his young men mounted and proceeded around it for 2 days with their nights, prosecuting his journey with diligence and not resting. And when the 3rd day arrived, he came in sight of his companions, and he was astounded at that which he beheld of the extent of the city and its height. Then he said, "O Emir, the easiest place in it is this place at which you have alighted." And thereupon the Emir Musa took Talib, the son of Sahel, and the Sheikh Abdul Samad, and they ascended a mountain opposite the city, and overlooking it. And when they had ascended that mountain, they saw a city that which eyes had not beheld any greater. Its pavilions were lofty, and its domes were shining. Its mansions were in good condition, and its rivers were running. Its trees were fruitful, and its gardens bore ripe produce. It was a city with impenetrable gates, empty, still, without a voice or a cheering inhabitant, but the owl hooting in its quarters, and birds skimming in circles in its areas, and the raven croaking in its districts and its great thought-fair streets, and bewailing those who had been in it. The Emir Musa paused, sorrowing for its being devoid of inhabitants, and its being despoiled of people and dwellers. And he said, "Extolled be the perfection of him whose ages and times change not, the creator of the creation by his power." And while he was extolling the perfection of God, to whom be ascribed might and glory, he happened to look aside, and lo, there were 7 tablets of white marble appearing from a distance. So he approached them, and behold, they were sculptured and inscribed, and he ordered that their writing should be read. And therefore the Sheikh Abdul Samad advanced and examined them and read them. And they contained admonition and matter for example and restraint unto those endowed with faculties of discernment. Upon the first tablet was inscribed in the ancient Greek language, quote, "O son of Adam, how heedless art thou of the case of him who hath been before thee. Thy years and age have diverted thee from considering him. Knowest thou not that the cup of death will be filled for thee, and that in short time thou wilt drink it? Look then to thyself before entering thy grave. Where are those who possess the countries and abase the servants of God and led armies? Death hath come upon them, and God is the terminator of delights and the separator of companions and the devastator of flourishing dwellings. So he has transported them from the amplitude of palaces to the straightness of the graves." And in the lower part of the tablet were inscribed these verses, quote, "Where are the kings and the peoples of the earth? They have quitted that which they have built and peopled. And in the grave they are pledged for their past actions. Here, after destruction, they have become putrid corpses. Where are the troops? They repelled not, nor profited. And where is that city they collected and hoarded? The decree of the Lord of the throne surprised them. Neither riches nor refuge saved them from it." Then the Emir Musa fainted. His tears ran down upon his cheeks, and he said, "By God, indifference to the world is the most appropriate and the most sure course." Then he caused an inkhorn and paper to be brought, and he wrote the inscription of the first tablet, after which he drew near to the second tablet, and the third and the fourth, and having copied what was inscribed on them, he descended from the mountain, and the world had been pictured before his eyes. And when he came back to the troops, they passed the day devising means of entering the city. And the Emir Musa said to his Wazir Talib, the son of Sahel, and to those of his chief officers who were around him, "How shall we contrive to enter the city, that we may see its wonders? Perhaps we shall find in it something by which we may ingratiate ourselves with the Prince of the Faithful." Talib, the son of Sahel, replied, "May God continue the prosperity of the Emir. Let us make a ladder and mount upon it, and perhaps we shall gain access to the gate from within." And the Emir said, "This is what occurred to my mind, and excellent is the advice." Then he called to the carpenters and blacksmiths and ordered them to make straight some pieces of wood and to construct a ladder covered with plates of iron. And they did so and made it strong. They employed themselves in constructing it a whole month, and many men were occupied in making it. And they set it up and fixed it against the wall, and it proved to be equal to the wall in height, as though it had been made for it before that day. So the Emir Musa wondered at it and said, "God bless you. It seems from the excellence of your work as you had adapted it by measurement to the wall." He then said to the people, "Which of you will ascend this ladder and mount upon the wall and walk along it and contrive means of descending into the city, that he may see how the case is and then inform us of the mode of opening the gate?" And one of them answered, "I will ascend it, O Emir, and descend and open the gate." The Emir therefore replied, "Mount, God bless thee." Accordingly, the man ascended the ladder until he had reached the top of it, when he stood and fixed his eye towards the city, clapped his hands and cried out with the loudest voice, saying, "Thou art beautiful." Then he cast himself down into the city, and his flesh became mashed with his bones. So the Emir Musa said, "This is the action of the rational. How then will the insane act? If we do the same with all our companions, there will not remain any one of them, and we shall be unable to accomplish our task and the affair of the Prince of the Faithful. Let's depart, for we have no concern with this city." But one of them said, "Perhaps another than this may be more steady than he." And so a second person ascended, and a third, and a fourth, and a fifth, and they ceased not to ascend by that ladder to the top of the wall, one after another, until 12 men of them had gone, acting just as the first had. Therefore the Sheikh Abdul Samad said, "There is none for this affair but myself, and the experienced did not like the inexperienced." But the Emir Musa said to him, "You shall not do that, nor will I allow thee to ascend to the top of this wall, for if you should die, you will be the cause of our deaths as well, and there would not remain one of us alive, since you are the guide to this party." The Sheikh, however, replied, "Perhaps the object will be accomplished by my means, through the will of God, whose name be exalted," and thereupon all the people agreed to his ascending. Then the Sheikh Abdul Samad arose and encouraged himself, and having said the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, he ascended the ladder repeating the praises of God, whose name be exalted, and reciting the verses of safety until he reached the top of the wall. Then he clapped his hands and fixed his eyes. The people therefore all called out to him and said, "O Sheikh Abdul Samad, do it not, and cast not thyself down." And they said, "Verily to God we belong, and verily unto him we return. If the Sheikh Abdul Samad fall, we all perish." Then the Sheikh Abdul Samad laughed immoderately and sat a long time repeating the praises of God, whose name be exalted, and reciting the verses of safety, after which he rose with energy and called out with his loudest voice, "O Emir, no harm shall befall you, for God, to whom be ascribed might and glory, has averted from me the effect of the artifice and fraudulence of the devil, through the blessing resulting from the utterance of the words, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim." So the Emir said to him, "What have you seen, O Sheikh?" He answered, "When I reached the top of the wall, I beheld 10 damsels like moons, who made a sign with their hands as though they would say, 'Come to us.' And it seemed to me that beneath me was a sea or a great river of water, whereupon I desired to cast myself down as our companions did. But I beheld them dead, so I withheld myself from them and recited some words from the book of God. Whereupon God averted from me the influence of those damsels' artifice, and they departed from me. Therefore I cast not myself down, and God repelled from me the effect of their artifice and enchantment. There is no doubt that this is an enchantment and an artifice which the people of this city contrived in order to repel from it everyone who should desire to look down upon it and wish to obtain access to it, and these our companions are laid dead." He then walked along the wall till he came to the 2 towers of brass, when he saw that they had 2 gates of gold without locks upon them or any signs of the means of opening them. Therefore the Sheikh paused as long as God willed, and looking attentively he saw in the middle of one of the gates a figure of a horseman of brass, having one hand extended as though he were pointing with it, and on it was an inscription, which the Sheikh read, and lo, it contained these words, quote, "Turn the pin that is in the middle of the front of the horseman's body 12 times, and then the gate will open." So he examined the horseman, and in the middle of the front of his body was a pin, strong, firm, well fixed, and he turned it 12 times, whereupon the gate opened immediately, and with a noise like thunder, and the Sheikh Abdul Samad entered. He was a learned man, acquainted with all languages and characters, and he walked on until he entered a long passage, whence he descended some steps, and he found a place with handsome wooden benches, on which were people dead, and over their heads were elegant shields, and keen swords, and strung bows, and notched arrows. And behind the next gate were a bar of iron, and barricades of wood, and locks of delicate fabric, and strong apparatus. Upon this the sheikh said within himself, "Perhaps the keys are with these people." Then he looked, and lo, there was a sheikh who appeared to be the oldest of them, and he was upon a high wooden bench among the dead men. So the Sheikh Abdul Samad said, "May not the keys of the city be with this sheikh? Perhaps he was the gatekeeper of the city, and these were under his authority." He therefore drew near to him and lifted up his garments, and lo, the keys were hung to his waist. At the sight of them, the Sheikh Abdul Samad rejoiced exceedingly. His reason almost fled from him in consequence of his joy, and he took the keys, approached the gate, opened the locks, and pulled the gate and the barricades and other apparatus, which opened, and the gate also opened with a noise like thunder by reason of its greatness and terribleness, and the enormousness of his apparatus. Upon this the Sheikh exclaimed, "God is most great," and the people made the same exclamation with him, rejoicing at the event. The Emir Musa also rejoiced at the safety of the Sheikh Abdul Samad, and at the opening of the gate of the city, the people thanked the Sheikh for that which he had done, and all the troops hastened to enter the gate. But the Emir Musa cried out to them, "O people, if all of us enter, we shall not be secure from some accident that might happen. Half shall enter, and half shall remain behind." Emir Musa then entered the gate, and with him half of the people who bore their weapons of war. And the party saw their companions lying dead, so they buried them. They saw also the gatekeepers and servants and chamberlains and lieutenants lying upon beds of silk, all of them dead. And they entered the market of the city, and beheld a great market with lofty buildings, none of which projected beyond another. The shops were opened, and the scales hung up, and the utensils of brass ranged in order, and the khans were full of all kinds of goods. And they saw the merchants dead in their shops. Their skins were dried, and their bones were carious, and they had become examples of him who would be admonished. They saw likewise 4 markets of particular shops filled with wealth. And they left this place and passed on to the silk market, in which were silks and brocades interwoven with red gold and white silver upon various collars, and the owners were dead, lying upon skins, and appearing almost as though they would speak. Leaving these, they went on to the market of jewels and pearls and jacinths, and they left it and passed on to the market of the money changers, whom they found dead, with varieties of silks beneath them, and their shops were filled with gold and silver. These they left, and they proceeded to the market of the perfumers, and lo, their shops were filled with varieties of perfumes and bags of musk and aloes wood and ned and camphor and other things, and the owners were all dead, not having with them any food. And when they went forth from the market of the perfumers, they found near unto it a palace, decorated and strongly constructed. And they entered it, and found banners unfurled, and drawn swords, and strung bows, and shields hung up by chains of gold and silver, and helmets gilded with red gold. And in the passages of that palace were benches of ivory, ornamented with plates of brilliant gold and with silk, on which were men whose skins had dried upon their bones. The ignorant would imagine them to be sleeping, but from the want of food they had died and tasted mortality. Upon this, Emir Musa paused, extolling the perfection of God, whose name be exalted, and his holiness, and contemplating the beauty of that place, and its strong construction, and its wonderful fabrication in the most beautiful form, and with the firmest architecture, and most of its decorations were an ultramarine. Around them were inscribed these verses, quote, "Consider what thou beholdest, man, and be on thy guard before thou departest. And prepare good provision, and you may enjoy it, for every dweller in a house shall depart. Consider a people who have decorated their abodes, and in the dust have become pledged for their actions. They built, but their buildings availed not, and treasured, but their wealth did not save them when their term had expired. How often they hoped for what was not decreed them, but they passed to the graves, and hope did not profit them. And from their high and glorious state they were removed to the narrowness of the sepulchre. Evil is their abode. Then there came to them a crier after they were buried, saying, Where are the thrones and the crowns and the apparel? Where are the faces which were veiled and curtained, and on which for their beauty proverbs were composed? And the grave plainly answered the inquirer for them, and to the cheeks the rose is gone from them. Long time they ate and drank, but now, after pleasant eating, they themselves have been eaten. And the Emir Musa wept until he became senseless, and afterwards, having given orders to write these verses, he went on into the interior of the palace. There he beheld a great hall and 4 large and lofty chambers, each one fronting another, wide, decorated with gold and silver and with various colors. In the midst of the hall was a great founder of alabaster, over which was a canopy of brocade, and in those chambers were places, one in each chamber, containing decorated fountains and tanks lined with marble, and channels of water flowed along the floors of those chambers, the 4 streams meeting together in a great tank lined with marbles of various colors. The Emir Musa then said to the Sheikh Abdul Samad, Enter these chambers with us. So they entered the first chamber, and they found it filled with gold and with white silver, and pearls and jewels, and jacinths and precious minerals. They found in it also chests full of red and yellow and white brocades, and they went thence to the second chamber, and opened a closet in it, and lo, it was filled with arms and weapons of war, consisting of gilded helmets, and Davidian coats of mail, and Indian swords, and lances of Khat Hejr, and maces of Kharizm, and other instruments of war and battle. Then they passed to the third chamber, in which they found closets having upon their doors closed locks, and over them were curtains worked with various kinds of embroidery. They opened one of these closets, and found it filled with weapons decorated with varieties of gold and silver and jewels. And then they went to the fourth chamber, where also they found closets, one of which they opened, and they found it full of utensils for food and drink, consisting of various vessels of gold and silver, and saucers of crystal, and cups set with brilliant pearls, and cups of carnelian and other things. So they began to take what suited them of these things, and each of the soldiers carried off what he could. And when they determined to go forth from these chambers, they saw there a door of saj inlaid with ivory and ebony, and adorned with plates of brilliant gold in the midst of that palace. Over it was hung a curtain of silk worked with various kinds of embroidery, and upon it were locks of white silver to be opened by artifice without a key. The Sheikh Abdul Samad therefore advanced to those locks, and he opened them by his knowledge and boldness and excellent skill, and the party entered a passage paved with marble, upon the sides of which were curtains whereon were figures of various wild beasts and birds. All these being worked with red gold and white silver, their eyes were of pearls and jacinths. Whosoever beheld them was confounded. Next they came to a saloon, on beholding which the Emir Musa and the Sheikh Abdul Samad were amazed at its construction. They then passed on and found a saloon constructed of polished marble adorned with jewels. The beholder imagined that upon its floor was running water, and if anyone walked upon it, he would slip. The Emir Musa therefore ordered the Sheikh Abdul Samad to throw upon it something that they might be able to walk on it, and he did this and contrived so that they passed on. And they found in it a great dome constructed of stones gilded with red gold. The party had not beheld in all that they had seen anything more beautiful than it. And in the midst of that dome was a great dome-crowned structure of alabaster, around which were lattice windows, decorated and adorned with oblong emeralds, such as none of the kings could procure. In it was a pavilion of brocade, raised upon columns of red gold, and within this were birds, the feet of which were of emeralds. Beneath each bird was a net of brilliant pearls spread over a fountain. And by the brink of the fountain was placed a couch adorned with pearls and jewels and jacinths, whereupon it was a damsel resembling the shining sun. Eyes had not beheld one more beautiful. Upon her was a garment of brilliant pearls. On her head was a crown of red gold, with a fillet of jewels. On her neck was a necklace of jewels, in the middle of which were refulgent gems, and upon her forehead were 2 jewels, the light of which was like that of the sun. And she seemed as though she were looking at the people and observing them to the right and left. When the Emir Musa beheld this damsel, he wondered extremely at her loveliness and was confounded by her beauty and the redness of her cheeks and the blackness of her hair. Any beholder would imagine that she was alive and not dead. And they said to her, "Peace be upon thee, O damsel." But Talib the son of Sahel said to the Emir, "May God amend thy state. Know that this damsel is dead. There is no life in her. How then can she return the salutation?" And he added, "O Emir, she is skillfully embalmed, and her eyes have been taken out after her death, and quicksilver has been put beneath them, after which they have been restored to their places, so they gleam, and whenever the air puts them in motion, the beholder imagines that she twinkles her eyes, though she is dead." Upon this Emir Musa said, "Extolled be the perfection of God, who has subdued his servants by death." And as to the couch upon which was the damsel, it had steps, and upon the steps were 2 slaves, one of them white and the other black, and in the hand of one of them was a weapon of steel, and in the hand of the other a jeweled sword that blinded the eyes. And before the 2 slaves was a tablet of gold, whereupon was read an inscription, which was this, quote, "In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Praise be to God, the creator of man, and he is the Lord of lords and the cause of causes. In the name of God, the everlasting, the eternal. In the name of God, the ordainer of fate and destiny. O son of Adam, how ignorant are you in the long indulgence of hope, and how unmindful are you of the arrival of the predestined period. Knowest thou not that death has called for thee and has advanced to seize your soul? Be ready then for departure and make provision in the world, for you will quit it soon. Where is Adam, the father of mankind? Where are Noah and his offspring? Where are the sovereign Kiras and Caesars? Where are the kings of India and Iraq? Where are the kings of the regions of the earth? Where are the Amalekites? Where are the mighty monarchs? The mansions are void of their presence, and they have quitted their families and homes. Where are the kings of the foreigners and the Arabs? They have all died and become rotten bones. Where are the lords of high decree? They have all died. Where are the Karun and Haman? Where is Shaddad the son of Ad? Where are the Canaan and the lord of the stakes? God has cut them off, and it is he who cuts short the lives of mankind, and he has made the mansions to be void of their presence. Did they prepare provision for the day of resurrection and make themselves ready to reply to the Lord of men? O you, if you know me not, I will acquaint you with my name and my descent. I am Tedmoore, the daughter of the king of the Amalekites, of those who ruled the countries with equity. I possessed what none of the kings possessed, and ruled with justice, and acted impartially towards my subjects. I gave and bestowed, and I lived a long time in the enjoyment of happiness and an easy life, and possessing emancipated female and male slaves. Thus I did until the summoner of death came to my abode, and disasters occurred before me. And the case was this. 7 years in succession came upon us, during which no water descended on us from heaven, nor did any grass grow for us on the face of the earth. So we ate what food we had in our dwellings, and after that we fell upon the beasts and ate them, and there remained nothing. Upon this, therefore, I caused the wealth to be brought, and melted it with a measure, and sent it my trusty men, who went about with it through all the districts, not leaving unvisited a single large city to seek for some food. But they found it not, and they returned to us with the wealth after a long absence. So thereupon we exposed to view our riches and our treasures, locked the gates of the fortresses of our city, and submitted ourselves to the decree of our Lord, committing our case to our master, and thus we all died, as you behold, and left what we had built and what we had treasured. This is the story, and after the substance there remains nothing but the vestige. And upon the tablet was also inscribed these words, quote, "Whoso arrives at our city and enters it, God facilitating his entrance, if touch anything that is on my body, for it is the covering of my person, and therefore let him fear God, and not seize aught for it, for he would destroy unto him, and a charge which I gave him in confidence. And peace be upon your trials and sickness." The Emir Musa, when he heard these words, again wept so violently that he became insensible, and after he had recovered, he wrote all that he saw, and was admonished by what he witnessed. He then said to his companions, "Bring the sacks and fill them with part of the riches and the vessels and the rarities and jewels." And thereupon Talib, the son of Sahel, said to the Emir Musa, O Emir, shall we leave this damsel with the things that are upon her? They are things that have no equal, nor is the like of them any time found. And they are more than the riches you had taken, and will be the best present by which you may ingrate yourself with the Prince of the Faithful. But the Emir replied, O you, did you not hear what the damsel had given as a charge, in the description upon this tablet? Moreover, and especially, she has given it a charge offered in confidence, and we are not of the people of treachery. The Wazir Talib, however, said, And on account of these words, will you leave the riches and these jewels when she is dead? What then should she do with these things, which are the ornaments of the world and the decoration of the living? With a garment of cotton might the damsel be covered, and we are more worthy of these things than she. Then he drew near to the steps and ascended them until he reached the spot between the two men, the slaves before mentioned, when, lo, one of these two smote him upon his back, and the other smote him with the sword that was in his hand, and struck off his head, and he fell down dead. So the Emir Musa said, May God not regard with mercy your resting place. There was in these riches a sufficiency, and covetousness does doubtlessly dishonor the person in whom it exists. He thereupon gave orders for the entry of the troops, who accordingly entered, and they loaded the camels with part of the riches and minerals, after which the Emir Musa commanded them to close the gates as it was before. They then proceeded along the sea coast until they came in sight of a high mountain overlooking the sea. In it were many caves, and lo, in these was a people of the blacks, clad in hides and with burnous of hides upon their heads, whose language was not known. And when they saw the troops, they ran from them and fled to those caves, while their women and their children stood at the entrances of the caves. So the Emir Musa said, O Sheikh Abdul Samad, what are these people? And he answered, These are the objects of the inquiry of the Prince of the Faithful. They therefore alighted, and the tents were pitched, and the riches were put down. And they had not rested when the king of the blacks came down from the mountain and drew near to the troops. He was acquainted with the Arabic language, therefore when he came to the Emir Musa, he saluted him, and the Emir returned his salutation and treated him with honor. Then the king of the blacks said to the Emir, Are you of mankind or the Jinn? The Emir answered, As to us, we are of mankind, and as to you, there is no doubt that you are of the Jinn, because of your seclusion in this mountain that is separated from the world, and because of the greatness of your make. But the king of the blacks replied, Nay, we are a people of the race of Adam, of the sons of Ham, the sons of Noah, on whom be peace. And as to the sea, it is known by the name of Al-Karkar. So the Emir Musa said to him, How did you obtain this knowledge, when there has not come unto you any prophet divinely inspired in such a country as this? He answered, Know, O Emir, that there appeared to us from the sea a person diffusing a light whereby the surrounding tracts are illuminated. And he proclaimed with a voice which the distant and the near hear, O sons of Ham, be abashed at him who sees and is not seen, and say, There is no God but God. Muhammad is the apostle of God, and I am Abul Abbas al-Khizr. Before that, we used to worship one another, but he called us to worship the Lord of mankind. Then he said to the Emir Musa, He has also taught us some words to say. And what, asked the Emir, are these words? He answered, They are these. There is no God but God alone. He has no partner, to him belongs dominion, and to him belongs praise. He gives life and kills, and he is able to accomplish everything. And we seek not access to God, to whom be ascribed might and glory, save by these words, nor know we any others. Also, every night of Friday we see a light upon the face of the earth, and we hear a voice saying, Perfect, holy, Lord of the angels and the Spirit. Whatsoever God wills comes to pass, and what he wills not comes not to pass. Every benefit from God is a favor, and there is no strength nor power but in God, the High, the Great. The Emir Musa then said to him, We are the associates of the Khalifa of Islam, Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, and we have come on account of the bottles of brass that are here in your sea, and wherein are the devils imprisoned from the time of Solomon the son of David, on both of whom be peace. He has commanded us to bring him some of them, that he may see them and divert himself by the view of them. And the king of the blacks replied most willingly. Then he feasted him with fish, and ordered the divers to bring up from the sea some of the bottles of Solomon. And they brought up for them 12 bottles, wherewith the Emir Musa was delighted, and the Sheikh Abdul Samad also, and the soldier, on account of the accomplishment of the affair of the Prince of the Faithful. The Emir Musa thereupon presented to the King of the Blacks many presents, and gave him large gifts. In like manner, too, the King of the Blacks gave to the Emir Musa a present consisting of wonders of the sea in the form of human beings, and said to him, "Your entertainment for these 3 days shall be of these fish." And the Emir replied, "We must carry with us some of them, that the Prince of the Faithful may see them, for thereby will his heart be pleased more than by the bottles of Solomon." Then they bade him farewell, and they journeyed back until they came to the land of Syria, and went in to the Prince of the Faithful, whereupon the Emir Musa acquainted him with all that he had seen, and all that had occurred to him with respect to the verses and histories and admonitions, and told of him the case of Talib the son of Sahil. And the Prince of the Faithful said to him, "Would that I had been with you, that I might have beheld what ye beheld." He then took the bottles, and proceeded to open one after another, and the devils came forth from them, saying, "Repentance, O Prophet of God, we will not return to the like conduct ever." And Abdul Malik ibn Marwan wondered at this. After this, the Prince of the Faithful caused the riches to be brought before him, and divided them among the Muslims. And he said, "God has not bestowed upon anyone like what he bestowed upon Solomon the son of David." Then the Emir Musa begged the Prince of the Faithful that he might appoint his son in his place as governor of the province, and that he might himself go to the noble Jerusalem, where to worship God. So the Prince of the Faithful appointed his son to the government, and he himself went to the noble Jerusalem, and he died there. This is the end of which has come down to us of the history of the city of brass, and God is all-knowing. And that is thus the end of the City of Brass. Quite a long story. I hope some of you stuck around for the entire thing. One of the spookier episodes from the 1001 Nights, although also very much a kind of classic 1001 Nights tale in many ways. It has a lot of the themes that most of those stories have. There is a clear morale to this story. It's a spooky story, right? So they come to this city, they find completely deserted, everyone's dead, especially the scene with the sort of princess, or the damsel as they describe her, on the steps or in the couch in this inner chamber of this great palace. The scene where she has been embalmed and her eyes have been replaced. It's a very sort of gruesome scene. And I also really like the part where they find this Jinn that's stuck in the pillar, and him then telling his story. There's a lot of really great stuff in this story, and it's quite a dark story, to be honest. Now, what's the most recurring theme of this story, the sort of morale of the story, as I'm sure most of you have noticed, is that they see these great treasures. They come to this city that is just beyond anything that they have ever experienced. Great treasures, great riches, great kings and queens have lived here. They have been a rich society, and now everyone's dead. And in all these inscriptions on the wall is basically the same message, which is, to boil it down, which is the basic message of the story as I interpret it, is that it doesn't matter how much wealth you accumulate, how much power you have in the world, because everyone will one day die, right? And you cannot take any of those riches with you to the grave. When you are in the ground, you are equal to everyone else, and all your riches and all your powers and all your palaces and great cities don't really matter at all. And so these inscriptions on the walls of these palaces are kind of like cries from these people who realized this fact when it was already too late. They hadn't prepared properly from the perspective of the morale of the story, right? They hadn't prepared properly for death, but instead had focused too much on worldly desires and worldly pleasures. Of course, a very classically religious morale kind of story, but I think one that is very striking, and in some ways I think it's very accurate, right? You don't need to be religious or follow a specific religion to know that, greed is never the answer, because at the end of the day, we're all going to die. Everyone will meet their grave and meet their death at some point. And so to focus, or to have your life be focused entirely on worldly pursuits at the end of the day isn't really going to mean anything once that life ends. And that is how I interpret the essential message of this story to be. But what I really like about the story, of course, is the spooky nature of it, right? This abandoned city, these dead bodies and all the jinns, and it's a very classic sort of Arabian Nights atmosphere that is described here. And I think it's just lovely in so many different ways. And that is going to do it for this year's Shocktober. It's been a really fun month. I love doing these episodes where I talk about these more sort of spooky or darker or more mysterious aspects of religion and history. It's the kind of stuff that I really love doing, and so it's going to be a recurring theme. But this is going to be the last episode. There might be an episode coming out soon, which is going to actually be a review of a recent TV show that came out, which has some religious themes that I want to discuss. But other than that, this will be the end of the month of Shocktober, as we call it here. For all of you out there, I hope you have a wonderful evening, a wonderful day, depending on when you're watching this. If you're celebrating Halloween, I wish you a happy Halloween. If you celebrate Samhain, I wish you a happy and meaningful Samhain. And if it's just a Sunday, then I hope you have the best Sunday of your entire life. And I wish you all the best. I will see you in the next video. Thank you.